Now, thousands of protesters held a rally in support of Ukraine outside Downing Street earlier. People carried placards that said, "War is not over in Ukraine, world wake up," and "Russian captivity killed." Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky's been meeting King Charles at Sandringham. He was dressed in his normal attire, not in a suit. The pair chatted briefly and posed for photographs before heading inside. We'll show you some of those photographs a little bit later. Now, he flew there by helicopter to that estate in Norfolk after attending the summit in London and has left the same way. That's Volodymyr Zelensky leaving Sandringham. Now, a woman's been arrested on suspicion of arson after a 4-year-old girl died in a house fire in Manchester. The girl was pulled from the blaze in the Rusholme area of the city but died of her injuries in hospital. Police say the 44-year-old woman was known to the girl. Train fares are going up, as indeed is the pressure on commuters battling record cancellations. The cost of many journeys in England and Wales will rise by about 4.6% today. Campaigners warn it will pile further misery on hard-pressed household budgets. Rail cards have also become more expensive. That's the first time in more than a decade. And Pope Francis remains in a stable condition after suffering a breathing crisis over the weekend, but he is continuing to battle double pneumonia in hospital. And the Vatican has just released a statement in the last half an hour or so, which says he's not required mechanical ventilation as he did a couple of days ago, but he has had the use of high-flow oxygen. The Vatican statement says his prognosis remains guarded due to the complexity of the clinical picture. He was admitted to hospital 70 days ago with a severe respiratory infection that led to further complications. And those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with more in about an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. This is a show where we take a look across the spectrum of culture, current affairs and politics, trying our very best to reintroduce something our ancestors called common sense. Coming up on the show tonight, an Iranian woman was shouted down at King's College London for telling the truth about Iran and daring to speak to a Jew. A gender-critical feminist has received an apology from the police. I'll be discussing this with Harry Miller from Fair Cop, and I'll be joined by an old friend to discuss whether free speech is a virus. And, of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience. We'll have those in the next section, but right now we're going to go straight into things with a story that's dominated the headlines for the last week. BBC bosses were forced to apologise and withdraw a Gaza documentary from iPlayer after being accused of pro-Hamas bias. The broadcaster spent £400,000 of taxpayers' money making the show, in which the main narrator was revealed to be the son of a senior Hamas official. A full audit is now underway to determine whether Hamas received any funds directly. Joining me now to talk about the latest developments is journalist and broadcaster Jonathan Sacerdoni. Hello.
Good to be with you.
Jonathan, the story was big last week. We actually already covered it with David Collier, who was the first person to uncover this connection. But then you actually uncovered some more nefarious goings-on behind the scenes in the documentary, right?
That's right. David uncovered very, very quickly, in a matter of hours after broadcast, the issue of the child being the son of a senior Hamas figure. And then as I was watching the documentary myself, I also spotted something a bit irregular, which is what I will call non-sequential editing. Just to explain what that means, it's definitely a no-no in news and current affairs. They announced one sequence with a caption across the whole screen that it was day whatever it was of the war, and they then showed a sequence which the voiceover, the child voiceover, said was the aftermath of an airstrike and ambulances going to the hospital. And there was a 10 or 11-year-old child who was a volunteer paramedic. I know, sounds ridiculous. That's because it is ridiculous. That child, during this whole sequence, had 3 different hair lengths and 4 different pairs of shoes in a sequence that was meant to have taken place in one day, probably even less than one day. And during that sequence, he also went from being an assistant paramedic rushing bodies into a hospital, a 10-year-old, and to becoming a journalist's assistant in the evening, and then, of course, the cleaner of the ambulances. Now, to anyone watching that, Firstly, it's obviously dodgy editing because it shows something that didn't happen in an order that they presented it in. But it also hints that the whole thing could well have been staged and that this child could be part of a phenomenon that's known as Pallywood, where Palestinian propagandists often use children in quite an abusive way, presenting them for credulous Western audiences who are sympathetic to the plight of children, naturally, and they present them as having to do these extraordinary jobs like being a paramedic or a journalist, and the fact that it seems completely unbelievable doesn't seem to bother them when they're putting it all together and feeding it out as part of their dodgy Palestinian propaganda documentary.
Yeah, because we've seen these very same child actors appearing in other news broadcasts from other channels. Channel 4 News has used them. And then there was also this thing about where the subtitles, they turned out that, and this has been a previous issue with the BBC, isn't it, where they would substitute Jew or Yahud, which literally means Jew, but they would substitute Israeli. So that's been going on in documentaries and news reports before. But one of the worst things is when they sort of talk about a jihad against Jews, and they changed it to a jihad against Israeli forces.
Not even a jihad, they just said battle with Israeli forces. So, again, I would say that in that situation, yes, it is something they've done before, but then so is denying that Hamas is a terrorist organisation. They've been doing that, probably the most vocal international news organisation doing that for the last 16, 17 months. When it comes to the translations, you can't just change what words mean because you wish the Palestinians didn't want to kill Jews in a holy war. I appreciate that might be how many in the BBC feel, but that is what Einat Wilf, the Israeli commentator, calls West-splaining. It's like saying, well, yes, they said they want to kill Jews in jihad, but they didn't really mean that. They meant they want better humanitarian care and coexistence. You can't just make up the news to be what you wish it was or what you would like the world to think it is. And I'm afraid that's what they're doing in mistranslating like that. And the more important feature of all of this is that at every stage that any of us pointed these things out, they dig their heels in and deny it first, rather than looking at the mistake and saying, you're quite right, this is dreadful, we'll investigate. They wait until it piles on one thing after another, and then, when forced to, they pull the documentary only for 500 lovies to decide that, actually, no, because it was abusing Jews in Israel, they should reinstate the documentary. I think the BBC needs now to take a really good, hard look at itself and say, time and time again, they've had to make apologies and pull programmes for their inaccuracies and biases and twisting lies on Israel specifically, and often on Jews. And they need to ask why that is. They should use this as an opportunity, because it's perhaps the lowest point in their history during our lifetimes. They should look at this and say, why is this happening? Do we have some kind of internal bias here? Do we have people here who are working for us, who are intrinsically, systematically anti-Israel and anti-Jewish? And if so, let's root them out. Let's use this opportunity to actually reveal the true crimes of what's going on in Gaza, with Hamas using children in that way to try and fool the West, with Hamas making propaganda films and using the BBC to put them out there, not showing a single fighter, a single rocket, a single gun in Gaza. They're just perpetuating the idea that Israel is on some sort of bloodthirsty war of slaughtering people in Gaza. It's obvious nonsense, and everyone at the BBC should know it or does know it, so it's time they stop pretending.
Well, you say it's the latest instance. We're talking about decades of this stuff, because there's a report written over 20 years ago into exactly this that the BBC commissioned and never released, and actually spent a huge amount of money to hold back, the Balin report. There have been reports since then, and every single time the BBC seems to just make excuses and hope that it goes away. As they did with this documentary, their first impulse was to go, oh, yes, we didn't know about this son, but now we're just going to kind of put that into the documentary so it adds some context, but we're still going to show it. And then finally, as you say, it piles on and piles on. So what's happened now is this week the BBC actually met, right, and to discuss this.
Yeah, there was a board meeting, and they then released this statement where they finally admitted quite a lot of this. They said they're going to investigate the other parts, like the translations and the non-sequential editing. But the truth is that that statement they put out asks more questions than it answered. For example, there's been a lot of questioning about whether or not money, that is to say, taxpayers' money or fee payers' money, that is collected a penalty of criminal action, whether that has gone towards people related to Hamas. And they did indeed admit that some money had been paid. They said a limited amount had been paid to the sister of the narrator, into her bank account for his mother. So that's not very clear either. It does make you wonder why they used this convoluted route. Is it because they were afraid and knew that this money was effectively going to Hamas-linked individuals? It also suggests, because they said that that payment was for specifically the narration, it suggests something that we could see from the content of the narration itself. The child was saying things which were not his so-called lived experience. He was giving a narration which included information that was not from his experience. It sounded like it was scripted and written for him. So who was it written by? Was it written by Hamas? Was it written by Hamas-associated people in the production team? Was it written by the BBC? We need answers to all of these questions, but above all else, I think this investigation that they're doing shouldn't be done by their own editorial standards board and trust. It should be done by a truly independent body. They're hiding behind this sort of veneer of bureaucracy where they say that it is separate from BBC News, but it is staffed by BBC people. It has the same institutional culture, and we know exactly how the BBC treats these kinds of complaints. So if it finds them guilty of anything, it will be the bare minimum, what they think they can get away with. It should be investigated independently, and when it comes to money, it should be investigated by counter-terror police, because this would be an extremely serious case of BBC money, which is paid for by you and I and other British people who have to pay a TV licence, and that money would be going to a terrorist organisation. Now, that is criminal, that is dangerous. It's an issue of national security, it's an issue of driving the viewers of the BBC towards hatred of Israel, hatred of Jews. It's really a twisting of things in a very sick way. I think the BBC has so many questions to answer in response to this documentary, and as you said, to years or decades of similar things going on. This is just the cherry on the top. They really need to answer for this. They need to turn the whole place upside down and sort this out. This could be their opportunity to do that, but I don't think they're going to.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the fact they're marking their own homework, that's a common criticism against the BBC in this matter. All other channels have to, it always goes to Ofcom straight away. But with the BBC, they sort of have this opportunity to do this, and it seems like part of that is hoping that it kind of goes away and the furore will die down in the meantime, which is what we saw with the Hanukkah bus a few years ago. We talked about that on this very show, where Jewish teenagers were accused of inciting even the racist violence against them. And then the Board of Deputies had to finance audio experts to come in and prove that actually these weren't anti-Muslim slurs. This was someone speaking in Hebrew calling out for help. But again, the BBC did nothing. They put it to the same board, and then they went away and said, yeah, well, and they changed it from slurs to one slur, and they hoped it would go away. And then it finally went to Ofcom. And a year later, it had all died down, and they still have this article up today. Do you think that this time it's finally pushed people far enough, that the awareness now of the bias at the BBC has reached a fever pitch that they will be forced to take action? Or do you think this is just going to be another opportunity for them to kick the ball down the road?
Well, I'm not optimistic that they're going to suddenly change their stripes because of this, or change their spots, excuse me. But I will say that, you know, those examples that you gave and plenty of others also demonstrate another problem, which is not just the anti-Semitism and the twisted negligence of their journalism in terms of what they're putting out, but also in terms of their complaints process, as well as marking their own homework, as well as having to do these investigations and get away with letting themselves off the hook or a very light rap on the knuckles. They also always drag their heels. They always say that people are wrong. The example of the Board of Deputies and the expensive forensic audio analysts. I mean, just think how ridiculous that was. Children, Jewish children, abused on a bus during a trip to Oxford Street to celebrate the festival of Hanukkah. Those children were abused by Muslims in the street and had to flee. And then the BBC reported that they carried out anti-Muslim slurs. Now, that is so absurd that when it was shown to them that this was absurd, they insisted they were right and forced the Jewish community to have to defend itself by getting these forensic analysts in to listen to that audio. Did they learn from that? No, they didn't. They didn't learn from it, so much so that they've put on, literally, a Palestinian propaganda movie in prime time, paying £400,000 for it, reportedly. That money, potentially even some of it going to Hamas. They made the star of the show a Hamas-linked child, his father a senior Hamas figure, another child in it pretending to be a paramedic, who was later shown to have been holding a gun and wearing a Hamas headband in photos. All of these things available for them to see, just the same as you and I can find them online. It beggars belief. It's very hard to believe that they don't know what they're doing. I think at this stage they've been gaslighting Jews and just right-thinking people for so long that it's impossible to say that nobody knows what's happening inside the BBC. They know full well what they're doing, in my opinion, and it's time that people called them out on it. I know lots of people who keep telling me that they're disgusted, that they're literally having to pay for this. I think the BBC should not be funded in this way, especially if it behaves this way. If people want instead to pay for Netflix or services like that and get rid of the need to pay for the licence fee, then I could quite understand why they would do that. To have our money spent in this way is utterly reprehensible, but beyond that, these people know exactly what they're doing, and they are contributing to an international wave of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment when Israel is busy fighting an existential war against a jihadi enemy that makes it perfectly clear, even in their own documentary, and they even hid that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big issue, isn't it, is that we are forced to pay on pain of going to jail, potentially, for this. I used to work for the BBC. I don't have an issue necessarily with the licence fee in terms of the ideals of what the licence fee is meant to stand for, but the argument goes, of course, whether they have been meeting those ideals or not. And I want to also point out, of course, that Hanukkah bus shows that when this bias happens, it's sometimes nothing to do with Israel at all. Of course, people go, oh, this is people who would talk about what we're talking about now. And by the way, I'd also like to say that people might say, oh, look how biased these people are or not. I think we're presenting, or you're presenting, I happen to agree with you, with your opinions, but people aren't being forced to pay for this channel. That's, of course, the big difference here.
But it's not a bias either. This is the point. If you call a commitment to the truth and responsible journalism a bias, then you're wrong. If I have that bias, I'm proud to have it. Because, frankly, to show children's experience in Gaza, it may be a valid thing to try and do in a documentary, but we all saw many children's involvement in Gaza just the same week during the hostage handovers, where we saw children dancing on a stage where the coffins of the dead Israeli hostages were. Those were also Gazan Palestinian children, and we didn't see any of that represented in this film. Under the rousing music that they had composed for it, under those sweeping, beautiful, soft focus shots with the long lenses to make sure everything looked beautiful, we didn't see any of that side of a child's experience in Gaza. No, we saw this sort of fantasy world that people like the BBC like to push out there, where children are wannabe Instagram influencers or volunteer paramedics, and they're not being abused by Hamas. The truth is, this film is an irresponsible betrayal of Palestinians as well, because it's painting this fantasy world in Gaza, which people who follow the region know is not the full picture. It's not even half the picture. Children in Gaza are abused by the tyrannical Islamic jihadi regime that is in charge there. They are both forced to act those sorts of roles. They are put in harm's way as human shields. These children deserve better, and they certainly deserve better than the BBC pretending that the fantasy propaganda they put out is a fair representation of the experience of war for those children in Gaza. It isn't. It's a betrayal of them as much as it's a betrayal of Jews, of Israel, of right-thinking people who respect responsible news reporting.
And a betrayal of the truth.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, this funny thing is, well, it's not even funny, but that Gaza documentary isn't even the only incident that week from the BBC. You talked about the disgusting scenes of the coffins, and you had a BBC political journalist sort of omitting the true nature of it and sort of saying, oh, do you remember the...
Yeah, I do. There was a report on BBC News
yeah.
on the website where they described the posters either side of the stage as showing the cost of Israel's actions in Gaza. But I think we all saw one of the main posters on that stage was a picture of Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, with vampire fangs dripping in blood above a picture of the dead babies. Now, that wasn't correctly described in that BBC report. And similarly, another BBC reporter put a post on X saying that both the Palestinian propaganda efforts and the Israeli propaganda efforts surrounding the hostage releases were nauseating, something he removed 24 hours later. But we haven't even seen that talked about in the mainstream media because in the scale of the BBC's mess-ups and calumnies about Israel, this paled into insignificance. But these things layer upon layer of failings and deliberate twistings, in my opinion. Bad editings, bad translatings. It's all wrong. Enough is enough.
And we haven't even discussed the 800 people, you mentioned 500, I think it's more than 800 now, of people who work in the media defending the documentary, even though the BBC have admitted how they've messed up here. And I remember seeing at the top of the list was the head of documentary directing at the National Film and Television School. If this is someone who's teaching people how to make documentaries and they think that this kind of business is acceptable is absolutely ridiculous. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining us. This is journalist, broadcaster Jonathan Sacerdoti. Thank you. Thank you. A BBC spokesperson said, during the production process, the independent production company, we asked in writing a number of times by the BBC about any potential connections he and his family might have with Hamas. Since transmission, they've acknowledged that they knew that the boy's father was a deputy agricultural minister in the Hamas government. They have also acknowledged that they never told the BBC this fact. It was then that the BBC's own failing that we did not uncover that fact and the documentary was aired. Whew. OK, next on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be taking questions from our studio audience. See you in 2 minutes.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nation, and a very warm welcome to my comedian guests this evening, Adam Kumas and Cressida Wetton. Hello, how you doing, Cressida? It always feels weird when I say on television to you, how are you? People don't know because we produce headliners together. We literally speak to each other every day, and we are totally sick of each other. That's not true.
We still like each other a little bit, don't we? A little bit.
A little bit, yeah. How you doing, Adam? You all right?
I'm okay. Yes, very good, thank you.
Okay, then fine. You have stronger positive feelings?
Yes, absolutely. For now.
Okay,
yes.
Wonderful. There we go. Well, we're going to go into our audience questions now. Our first question is from Chris, visiting from Devon.
That's right.
Thank you so much for being here.
Has it turned out that chopping off healthy body parts might not actually be that good for you?
Yeah, has it turned out chopping off healthy body parts might not actually be that good for you? So this is a study of over 100,000 patients over the age of 18 with gender dysphoria, has found that those who undergo transgender surgeries are at greater risk for mental health problems, including depression, suicidal ideation and anxiety. The research, conducted by Oxford Academic Journal of Sexual Medicine, also found an elevated risk of substance use post-surgery. So, Chris, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the arguments of people pushing trans ideology, but they would say that if you don't get surgery, if you are not affirmed, then you are at risk of committing suicide. This seems to suggest it's actually the other way around.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
That's my overall view. And who in their right mind would take a perfectly healthy young body and commit that individual or that body to lifelong medical requirements, medical treatment, forever and ever and ever, costing the taxpayer goodness knows how much, when perhaps a little bit of time might put people in a better frame of mind and make them rethink.
Well, I 100% agree with you. You know your stuff. I think there's going to be a role for you on the show in the future. So, Krista, as
Chris has nailed it.
Chris has absolutely nailed it. We are talking also about mostly young bodies now, mostly young women, because before this whole sort of social phenomenon craze started, it was mostly men in their 40s who would undergo the surgery.
Right.
And now, of course, we've seen this idea that it's a social contagion, and it seems to have gone up 9,000% amongst young girls, teenage girls mostly. So seeing this study coming out, and actually it's pushing totally the opposite narrative that's been kind of forced upon us these last 10 years or so.
Yeah, that's all true, yes. It's interesting that you said it's mostly female. That's true. The numbers are young women now. But I think the article that we read today actually said that it's the people having feminising surgery that leads to even worse results, which is really interesting. I don't know if that tells you something about male libido. Maybe there's more regret later in life.
Yeah. Well, there are some people who don't transition who also obviously have mental health issues. But this is sort of when it is always about, like, follow the science, follow the evidence. Yeah. Now we have some evidence, and it doesn't support that case that actually surgery was the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting to see. Obviously, we're seeing a lot more data now that people are sort of regretting these procedures, and also maybe physically chopping off body parts isn't actually helpful for a lot of people. I think if we could go back to, and maybe I'm saying this in a bit pithy way, like if it is a social contagion because it is young people, that's why this is so tragic. If we could just move it back to men in their 40s, which will be me in about 10 years, maybe I wouldn't care so much.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, good luck with the getting the electrolysis. Getting rid of that.
It's going to cost me a lot. I'll give you some hair though at the end of the show.
Extensive surgery needed on that beard. Our next question's from Roger.
Hello. With regard to Sadiq Khan lighting up Oxford Circus for Ramadan, why is it not called Happy Daylight Fasting to Everyone Fasting Holiday?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so why is it not called Happy Daylight Fasting to Everyone Fasting Holiday? This is the start of Ramadan 2025, was celebrated with lights being switched on at London's Piccadilly Circus on Wednesday, led by Mayor Sadiq Khan. Funded by the charity, the Aziz Foundation, the celebration is now in its third year, with hundreds in Leicester Square gathering to mark the occasion. So I think the idea that people seem to be a little bit upset with this is because the Christmas lights, or the so-called Christmas lights, have been changed to Happy Holiday lights, and no mention of Christmas at all.
Right, yeah, so that's exactly, it should be the same, shouldn't it, really, for,
So maybe we should call it, Happy Fasting Day for anybody who's doing keto as well.
It either applies or it doesn't, does it?
Well, this is it, but then that's what we've seen, of course, across all these areas.
I think it's a lovely educational opportunity, isn't it? That's the impression I get. That it says there's a lot of people going who aren't Muslims, they don't observe Ramadan, but they're there to learn and take pictures. So,
and to be part of it.
There you go. I think that's what it's about.
Well, that's what it's about. You being facetious there.
Tiny bit.
I'm being careful.
Well, it's Islam is a proselytizing religion. There's, of course, nothing wrong, Adam, with, look, there's the Hanukkah goes up Hanukkah. Makes sense, I guess. Christmas trees at Christmas. So there are other religions are served and celebrated. There's nothing wrong with that. I guess the problem, as we sort of talked about, is this idea that the other religions can't. Well, certainly Christmas. They can't. They're not saying Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I think so. I'll go off on a limb and say I'm not part of that community, so I'm not a particularly big fan of it. If I was, maybe I would be. I do like lights. Lights are fun, so let's keep more of those on. I do think, is there a difference though? Because this has been funded by a charity, so they're able to put that in. And whereas the Christmas lights, all the Xmas, the non-descript lights are funded by the taxpayer. Could this be solved by a Christian charity? Just like, if we all took our money out and put some into Christmas charity, maybe we get a big Christmas one. Like, maybe that week, maybe we should do that as well.
So you think it's public money that's paying for the Christmas lights, so it should be a bit broader? That's an interesting argument.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, maybe like if this is a charity doing that, it's not coming out of my pocket, but maybe we should get a Christmas. Maybe there should be a Christian charity doing it and showing them.
And have the word Christmas.
Yeah, have the word Christmas. Yeah, maybe.
All right, bring Christmas back. Our next question's from Marguerite.
Hi. Hello. Do vulnerable, abused women have the right to not be around men?
Do vulnerable, abused women have the right to not be around men? Yes, this is one of Scotland's largest women's aid charities, has said it will not allow trans women to use its services in opposition to its umbrella body. Edinburgh Women's Aid has stated it will prohibit trans women or males who identify as non-binary from attending its group support services or refuges, even if they hold a gender recognition certificate. And further says it will not hire trans women or non-binary males as staff, citing exemptions in the Equality Act 2010. What do you think about this? It seems common sense to me, women who have been abused by men not wanting to be around biological men.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense, and I sort of agree, like, if they have gone through, said experiences and don't want to be around men, then they have the right to not be around men, and vice versa. If it was men who'd been through experiences and don't want to be around women, then it should be the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's actually an interesting point. What about, of course, providing services for men, but also what's wrong with providing services for, I'm sure that there are trans women who have been abused and require help and services, but of course there's nothing wrong with setting up a separate service for that rather than lumping them in with women.
Yeah, and that's a topic that's come up a lot, isn't it, over the past couple of years? Why can't we have like a third option? I tend to agree with you. I think we should have the right to be seen by a biological woman in certain situations. Well, in most situations, actually, but anything where you feel vulnerable, of course.
Yeah. But it's incredible that it's sort of got to this, but it seems so common sense, yet for many years it wasn't that. And even the service, there was a service in Edinburgh run by a trans woman who didn't even have a GRC.
Yeah, I think there's so many things to recognise about this, and I think one of the main things is there's so many benefits to keeping it a safe space for biological women, and it's not just because it's keeping trans women out, but it's also just anyone who might try to abuse that system, as you sort of alluded to, like bad actors who might try and go under the guise of that. Like, so there's so many benefits to having this, and I'm glad someone's changing it.
Fine, fair enough. By the way, before anyone tweets me going, why you keep on saying biological women, it's just to keep things sensible. Normally I would just say women. Maybe we're going to start...
We know what you mean.
Maybe we could just
I don't know what you mean. I'm glad you're clarifying it.
Our final question for the moment is from Big Steve. Big Steve.
Hi, mate.
Hey, mate.
How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good. Let's catch up later,
yeah, see you later. Should diversity schemes... Hang on, I forgot it. Get on their bike.
Get on the bike. Wow, that was said so naturally there, Steve. Talking about bad actors, should diversity schemes get on their bike? People from ethnic minority groups should be given free cycling lessons to make the drive to net zero more inclusive, climate chiefs have said. Climate advisors recommended the ministers take the inspiration from the German city of Freiburg. Their scheme explained that, quote, people from minority ethnic backgrounds disproportionately travel by public transport. Therefore, costs from electrifying buses are being passed on to the users, increasing transport inequality. So, Steve, what do you think about this?
Well, I thought DEI ended when Trump came into power.
Yeah, but that's a different country.
Yeah, it is, Steve, yeah.
a very big country and has
still separate there.
Well, there's nothing wrong with encouraging people to ride bicycles.
I don't want to ride a bicycle. I read that it's women and ethnic minorities. I'm a woman. I don't want to ride a bicycle. Leave me alone. It's a decision. I've got my own choices.
But also, it's just make the options, Adam, to anybody to ride the bicycle. I don't know why it has to be specifically targeted.
I think it's just bad framing of this. Had they framed it as people who don't earn enough money want to get on bikes, fine. But don't just say people who are like different colours and stuff can't ride. That's insulting.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's like it's definitely a class thing. It's not a race thing because the richer you get, but they ride more bicycles. But normally they're stationary and there's an iPad in front. It's branded.
Fair enough. So next on Free Speech Nation, police have admitted their treatment of a gender-critical campaigner was unacceptable, as our next guest has suggested officers colluded to make up a victim. He'll reveal those shocking accusations after this break. See you in a second.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. Well, if you're heading towards Spain and the Canaries over the coming days, there will be some rain and potentially some strong winds around at times, but conditions will improve here as the week goes on. For parts of central Med, generally a fine start to the week here, maybe a few showers around, and for eastern areas, certainly temperatures are beginning to climb after a cold few days. And further west, actually, sunshine by the middle part of the week for Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Getting into medicine at a very early age, you had an interest when you were really, really young, didn't you?
I did. I decided to go to medicine when I was 8. And that was based on the stories my father used to tell me about my grandfather, who I never met, because my grandfather died when he was 11.
Yeah.
And he was in the military, and he was stationed up in the Himalayas. And he was a doctor in the military. And not only did he serve in the military, but he also served his patients. And he served them to the degree where he would go out and he'd take them supplies, and he'd really look after them and make sure that they were not just well, but could live and survive. And it was on a day when he was out there helping his patients. There was a storm up in the Himalayas.
Wow.
And he was out there taking blankets and clothes and food up to them. And on the way back, as he was coming down the Himalayas, there was a landslide which took his Jeep over the edge, and he perished in that. So he gave his life to his service. And it was these stories about my grandfather, what he did and how he helped people, that really inspired me to follow in his footsteps. Not necessarily to go into the military, but to go into medicine.
But he's left a wonderful legacy, because fast forward, you came to this country when you was 4, and you've studied medicine.
Yep.
And you do, we were talking earlier about DNA. You're looking at DNA, looking at people's DNA. You can do profiles on people, predict. Well, you can actually say with some accuracy where they've lived in the past, what jobs they've done, and what medically may happen to them in the future.
Yeah. And I think, over the last, we've been looking at the gene. There was a Human Genome Project last century which finished.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Police have apologised over an investigation they mounted into a Newcastle United fan banned by the football club after expressing gender-critical views on social media. Lindsay Smith was accused of being transphobic after suggesting that pro-transgender activism was homophobic. A complainant told Newcastle United that trans people would not feel safe sitting near her. Northumbria police have admitted crucial elements of their hate crime investigation were not acceptable. Joining me now is founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller. Hello, Harry.
Yeah, hi. What an absolute atrocious story. And it took them over a year to work out that what they'd done was wrong. Got a 33-page report with 14 officers named who didn't understand what a crime was. What they did here, they said, well, Lindsay's tweets are a little bit, they're upsetting somebody, but because you can't define grossly offensive, it can be anything that anybody thinks it is. If somebody thinks that it's offensive, it's offensive. And then one of the officers said, well, hold on a minute. We don't appear to have a victim in this sad story. And so what they did was they said, well, we'll just make one up. Let's pretend there's a victim. And let's pretend that that victim is grossly offended. And let's act on the basis of that. Can you imagine the murder squad doing similar and saying, well, we don't actually have a body, but what we've done is we've drawn the outline of a body on the pavement, and we're all going to imagine that there's a dead body there, and we're going to investigate on the basis of this made-up victim. That's what's happened here. Now, you say that they apologised. I dispute that. What they've said is that the standard of service toward Lindsay, now that's not one as though they were serving Lindsay, but the standard of service toward Lindsay was below standard. They're treating it almost as though they've served overcooked sprouts. They don't seem to recognise quite how serious this is. 14 officers, a superintendent, a detective inspector, a detective sergeant, in fact, 2 detective sergeants, CID, and a strange unit called Quality Control, all decided that Lindsay Smith saying, this is your daily reminder that trans women are men, met the definition of a crime. Now, one of the sergeants was so concerned about this, and the reason that he was so concerned was he said that Lindsay's tweets might discourage young people from transitioning. Can you imagine a police sergeant being more concerned about Lindsay's tweets and thinking, oh my goodness, she might discourage somebody from detransitioning. We better go out and arrest her. This is the level of insanity in all this. Now, 1 or 2 of the police officers did stop and think. As I said, they realised there was no crime. And there's a standard in British justice, and it's this: no victim, no crime. No victim, no crime. They knew from the outset there was no victim, so they simply made one up.
Well, I thought that
I can't think there's any. I can't think of anything more utterly corrupt than making up a victim in order to pursue an investigation based on your political conviction.
You say there was no victim. Sorry, I read somewhere, now this could well be wrong, that there was a suggestion that the complaint came from someone with connections to the football club, and then the football club worked with Northumbrian police. Is that right? So there's possibly this sort of behind-the-scenes collusion going on.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There was no victim. And so what the police did, they worked with Newcastle United to imagine that there was a victim. And they said to Newcastle United, do you think that people in your stands, people who come to support Newcastle United, might be concerned about having a hateful bigot in the stands? And they said, well, yeah, probably. And so they said, right, that's it. It's a hate crime. Let's go and interview her. Let's go and confiscate her phone. Let's go and interrogate her about these tweets. And then, of course, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they then went back to Newcastle United and said, yes, there is indeed a hate crime. And the hate crime is malicious communications. And then Newcastle said, OK, then, because she's being invested for malicious communications, we'll ban her for 3 years. From the stadium.
Well, let's talk about that, because the police have apologised and they've insisted that they weren't influencing the club's decision. Now, the club case is still going on, right? Lindsay is still taking the club to court because she's still banned. Is that correct? Even after all of this?
That's right, but it's simply not true that they didn't influence Newcastle United. They did influence Newcastle United. They told Newcastle United that this was a hate crime. What they should have done is told Newcastle United to stop being so silly, stop being so stupid. That's what they should have done, but they didn't. They went back and forth to Newcastle United and convinced them that there was a hate crime. Newcastle United confirmed it to the police, and they all acted with this absolute state of utter madness against Lindsay. Now, that's one thing. But the other thing is 14 police officers were on this case. You can't get somebody to come round as a burglary, let alone 14 police officers. For what? For saying that that Lindsay Smith, a gender-critical lesbian, says that she's LGB, not LGBT. That's what she said, and that's what they took offence at.
So they've apologised. They've said that they're going to. They said they are now going to be going through. They're going to be changing their procedures. What do you think they really will? Because of course you've been through this yourself, and did they change afterwards?
No, it hasn't changed at all. The police have consistently ignored my High Court ruling in 2019. They've consistently ignored the Court of Appeal in 2021. Again, they've consistently ignored Suella Braverman's statutory guidance, and they've consistently ignored the College of Policing's hate crime guidance. Learning isn't going to cut it. Okay. What we have here is a problem of deep, systemic discrimination against gender-critical women. Well, and that's it.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining me. That's the founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller. He also makes my job very easy because I don't have to ask him any questions. So in an apology to Lindsay Smith, Northumbria Police said the effect of these events to your personal life is neither disputed nor taken lightly. The investigating officer extends sincere apologies for your situation you have found yourself in. Lindsay Smith will be appearing live on Ben Leo tonight from 9 p.m, and I believe you can support her case if you go to the Free Speech Union website. Next on Free Speech Nation, a US congressman has written to Sir Keir Starmer calling out what he calls the censorship of the UK. But what does a new act that is set to pass through Congress mean for free speech? We also have the return of a very, very special guest. Find out more after the break.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. The north-south split that we've seen over the weekend does continue into the new working week with temperatures around about average for the time of year, but they are on the rise by the time we get to next week. However, high pressure still very much in charge across the southern half of the UK. Weather fronts trying to push in from the northwest, but generally weakening as they bump into that area of high pressure. This weather front perhaps bringing some quite heavy rainfall to western parts of Scotland through Sunday evening, but that rain gradually easing as it slips its way south and eastwards. The further south across the UK is a bit of a different picture. Plenty of clear spells overnight and likely turning really quite chilly here, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places, but generally not quite as cold under that cloud further north. Where we do see those clear spells across the southern half of the UK, we are likely to see some mist and fog developing overnight, and that could lead to a bit of disruption during Monday morning's rush hour, so do take care if you are travelling. Across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, into southern parts of Scotland, quite a cloudy start to the new working week. Some outbreaks of rain and drizzle, perhaps some hill fog in places, and for much of Scotland it will be a really quite cloudy start to the day. Some blustery showers feeding in across parts of Shetland and Orkney through Monday morning. Those blustery showers continue as we head towards Monday afternoon for Shetland and Orkney, and that rain and cloud across the central swathe of the UK does gradually start to ease as we go through the afternoon, but still remaining quite grey here to the end of Monday. But further south, again, the best of the sunshine here, plenty of blue skies on offer, and temperatures similar to what we saw over the weekend, highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees as a maximum. As we then start on Tuesday, it'll be another cold, frosty, perhaps misty and foggy start across the southern half of the UK, but always cloudier further north, seeing rain arriving across the very far northwest as we head towards Tuesday afternoon, and really turning quite blustery here as well, perhaps some outbreaks of quite heavy rain across the northwest. But further south, it does look like it's going to stay sunny throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, and those temperatures are on the rise. We could see highs of 15 or 16 by Thursday.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So Keir Starmer has said the UK guards free speech preciously following criticism from US Vice President JD Vance. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, an act that is currently passing through US Congress would allow foreign officials deemed to be censoring American speech to be banned from entering the US or even deported from the country. To explain this in more detail, I'm now joined by legal counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom International, Lorcan Price. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is actually huge. I don't think people appreciate this. Something is going through Congress now that is potentially going to mean that UK politicians will not be allowed into the country or even being kicked out. They're even subpoenaing tech companies, right?
Yes. So this is one of these stories that I think the implications of it haven't fully sank in yet to decision makers and policy makers. Jim Jordan's committee, the Judiciary Committee, has really decided to go after what they regard as attacks on US companies by regulators in Europe, in the European Union, and here it would be the British government and Ofcom and so on. And they are now passing this legislation called the No Censors on Our Shores Act that will specifically amend US immigration law to exclude and remove people who are engaged in censorship that could affect Americans. And I think that's going to be expanded, my view would be, to American companies as well. So both individual Americans whose speech might be censored by decisions made on this side of the Atlantic, and then American companies. So you could have a situation in the future where the head of Ofcom or somebody else who's involved in prosecutions in this country for speech offences is banned from entering the United States. Wow. And I think this is just the start of what JD Vance described as this kind of really concern they have about free speech. I think you could call it free speech diplomacy. Because remember, he used about 10% of his speech in Munich, which is a major security conference, to talk about freedom of expression. And he specifically talked about this country. And so it is a real concern, I think, in policy-making circles in America that you have this extraordinary problem with democracies over here in Europe who are arresting people, who are censoring people, fining people for expressing non-violent opinions about matters of public controversy.
And it could get even worse, of course, with the online safety bill.
Absolutely.
And what do you think is going to be the response over here? Do you think that UK politicians have grasped what's actually going on over in America?
I don't think they have. And I think they've boxed themselves into a corner, not just in the UK, but in Europe, where their feeling is free expression is so dangerous to our society that we have to criminalise it at every step, because we can't allow people to challenge a number of the assumptions that they've made about immigration, about trans ideology and all these things. So the best way is to control the society with criminal law. And there's one section of the Online Safety Act that's coming in that would actually make it a criminal offence to share misinformation online. So people don't even fully, I think, realise the consequences of that.
This story is huge. I just feel very guilty because we have run out of time, but we are going to cover it again, no doubt. In the meantime, thank you so much, Lorcan Price. See you guys in a few minutes at the end of the first hour of Free Speech Nation. Bye, thank you.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. The north-south split that we've seen over the weekend does continue into the new working week, with temperatures around about average for the time of year, but they are on the rise by the time we get to next week. However, high pressure still very much in charge across the southern half of the UK. Weather fronts trying to push in from the northwest, but generally weakening as they bump into that area of high pressure. This weather front perhaps bringing some quite heavy rainfall to western parts of Scotland through Sunday evening, but that rain gradually easing as it slips its way south and eastwards. The further south across the UK is a bit of a different picture. Plenty of clear spells overnight and likely turning really quite chilly here, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places, but generally not quite as cold under that cloud further north. Where we do see those clear spells across the southern half of the UK, we are likely to see some mist and fog developing overnight, and that could lead to a bit of disruption during Monday morning's rush hour, so do take care if you are travelling. Across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England into southern parts of Scotland, quite a cloudy start to the new working week. Some outbreaks of rain and drizzle, perhaps some hill fog in places, and for much of Scotland it will be a really quite cloudy start to the day. Some blustery showers feeding in across parts of Shetland and Orkney through Monday morning. Those blustery showers continue as we head towards Monday afternoon for Shetland and Orkney, and that rain and cloud across the central swathe of the UK does gradually start to ease as we go through the afternoon, but still remaining quite grey here to the end of Monday. But further south, again, the best of the sunshine here, plenty of blue skies on offer, and temperatures similar to what we saw over the weekend. Highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees as a maximum. As we then start on Tuesday, it'll be another cold, frosty, perhaps misty and foggy start across the southern half of the UK, but always cloudier further north, seeing rain arriving across the very far northwest as we head towards Tuesday afternoon, and really turning quite blustery here as well, perhaps some outbreaks of quite heavy rain across the northwest. But further south, it does look like it's going to stay sunny throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, and those temperatures are on the rise. We could see highs of 15 or 16 by Thursday.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
An advert for clothing retailer Next has been banned after it's judged to feature an unhealthily thin model.
Well, the advert, which was a product listing for denim leggings on the retailer's website, was deemed irresponsible by the Advertising Standards Authority after a single viewer complained.
A single viewer, OK. In its defence, Next said the ad was created with a strong sense of responsibility to both consumers and society, and while admitting the model was slim, they added that she had a healthy and toned physique that aligned with the nature of its product, its leggings.
Well, is it irresponsible to feature slim models in adverts? Let's debate this now. We're joined by the showbiz broadcaster and body positivity advocate Danielle Broadbent and the journalist and broadcaster Emma Trimble. Danielle, let's start from you. Did the Advertising Standards Authority get this one right?
Absolutely. I mean, loads and loads of brands sell leggings and they don't need to feature a super slim model to sell their clothing and their leggings. Now, from my point of view, the ASA are not saying that this woman is unhealthy. They're saying the way she's being styled and the way she's posing looks unhealthy. And with such a trend going on at the moment with curvy plus size models in the fashion weeks, the trends of weight loss pens and things that are going around, are we encouraging, when we see adverts like this, vulnerable young teenage girls who are quite vulnerable anyway with body image? Are we encouraging eating disorders?
I think the idea that society is somehow, holding up anorexia as a virtue is just an anachronism. This woman is healthy. She's being body shamed for being healthy. I think people really just need to, and I know this sounds harsh, but I think they just need to get over themselves. It's this kind of scrutiny that is actually leading to people being so fixated on the way that people look.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation, including the return of a very special guest. Plus, we'll be joined by an Iranian woman who was shouted down at King's College London. But first, let's get a news update from Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you very much. Good evening to you. Our headlines. The Prime Minister has dismissed suggestions the United States is an unreliable ally as he unveiled a 4-point plan to guarantee peace in Ukraine. World leaders gathered at a security conference in London earlier and agreed to keep military aid flowing into Ukraine while the war continues, increase economic pressure on Russia, ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and deter any future aggression by Vladimir Putin. Well, the summit comes after Europe's leaders rallied round Volodymyr Zelensky after his confrontation with Donald Trump at the White House on Friday, which has created a divide between the US and its European partners. Sir Keir says any new deal to support Ukraine must be backed by strength, with each country contributing what they can. But now is the time for action.
We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace.
The Prime Minister also announced a new deal which will allow Ukraine to use £1.6 billion of UK export finance, which he says will allow it to buy 5,000 air defence missiles and will create jobs in Britain's defence sector. And Volodymyr Zelensky has since had a meeting with King Charles at Sandringham, still dressed in his normal attire, i.e. not in a suit. Zelensky flew to the estate in Norfolk by helicopter after attending the summit in London, and he left by the same way a short time ago. More than 500 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel today in the biggest single day of arrivals so far this year. More than 500 people crossed the Channel on Sunday in the biggest single arrival day. Improving weather conditions in the Channel saw the first migrant boat cross into UK waters at around 5 a.m. and they kept coming through the morning. Multiple boat arrivals detected heading towards the UK. A total of 5 Border Force vessels scrambled to intercept those boats as they came into British waters. Finally, a British-Israeli woman held hostage by Hamas for 15 months says her scars represent freedom, hope and strength. Emily Damari has undergone surgery for injuries sustained during the October the 7th attacks when she was shot and taken hostage in Gaza. Ms Damari, who has 2 fingers missing from her left hand, says she was held for 471 days with severe injuries and little medical treatment. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with more just after 9 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Plenty more still to come in the next hour. But first, we're going to go to some more questions from our audience. Our first question's from Mike.
Hi, Josh.
Hey, Mike.
Why do we need an expensive clinical trial to show that giving dangerous drugs to children is bad?
Yes, why do we need a trial to find out that giving drugs to children is bad? So, yeah, this is based on children being given puberty blockers in a 2-year clinical trial from this spring after researchers were awarded £10.7 million for a gender care study. The drugs, which suppress hormones linked to puberty, have been banned indefinitely in the UK for under 18s after experts raised concerns they posed an unethical safety risk. So I thought that good things were happening. I thought the West Streeting came in and followed the Cass report and these drugs were banned. And now, what do you think about this? Now it seems like they're going to be doing a trial and potentially giving this to...
Absolutely. Streeting seems to be doing a really good job, a breath of fresh air. And then suddenly a trial's needed, putting children in danger. When, as you say, all the evidence is in Cass. It's all there. You don't need the trial. You don't need to put children at risk at all.
No, I mean... Thank you, Mike. Cresta, do you think that part of the problem was the Cass report? Because it said there wasn't the evidence there. So then someone went, OK, well, let's go get the evidence.
Well, OK. No, I don't want to call the Cass report part of the problem. I don't see it like that at all. But I see what you're saying. You're saying that this trial, the excuse for it is that the Cass report is saying we don't know enough yet.
Yeah.
I'll refer you to our earlier story. We know a fair bit, don't we? And one of the arguments, of course, is that once you start this treatment, it's very likely that you're then on a conveyor belt. And also, the study's only 2 years.
Yeah.
We don't know what happens. I mean, I can guess, but we don't know what happens in 10, 20 for the rest of your life. It's not good.
It seems crazy to give sort of taxpayers money for this. It's I'm trying to think of analogies for it, but it's like saying, oh, well, let's do an experiment or a trial into whether it's a good thing to have anorexia.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like,
Yeah.
like we're sort of encouraging this thing that's already been proven to have negative side effects. These drugs have been proven to lower bone density. As Crest is saying, they lead on to taking further drugs, making people infertile. What do you think about this?
Well, I'm sort of cast back to when I was in school, and we used to actually have people come in and just, tell us explicitly as children never to do any drugs. And I can't, I guess I'm of the opinion of if you can't do the cool drugs, let's not do the dangerous ones.
That's the two options.
I think that is a really good. I think they should add acid to this stuff there.
I'm on air, so I won't know.
It's like, whoa, what gender am I? Okay, our next question is from John.
Is cancel culture over?
Thank you, John. Is cancel culture over? This is an Australian radio station parting ways with a presenter after comments he made about the Matildas and women's football were condemned as disgusting and misogynistic. Marty Sheargold, a broadcaster and comedian, was met with outrage after he compared the Australian side to schoolgirls with infighting and friendship issues. Sheargold went on to ask a co-host if they had any men's sports to talk about. So, John, what do you think about it? Have you heard about the story at all?
Well, I have a very positive uninterest in competitive sport, but I...
women's football, yeah?
No interest in that at all, but I
right, you've been cancelled, John. Thank you.
I have been cancelled by a woke charity, which is why I got interested in all this free speech stuff.
OK, well, there we go. Thank you, yes. So, John, I think, by the way, you'd make an excellent radio DJ. Yeah, this story is... It seems like Australia is a couple of years behind maybe where we are. I personally feel a little bit for someone who had a joke possibly taken out of context myself.
Oh, my God, yeah. It's the GBNews' answer to we were on a break. Anyway, this story, what really made me laugh was I read about it, but I don't know exactly what he said. It's just said that this person who'd complained put an edited version of his comments on Twitter and said, this is disgusting. She's admitting that she wasn't telling us. So we still don't know what he said, but it was inappropriate, whatever it was. What's the question? Is it over? No, it's not over.
No, well, it's certainly not over in Australia. But I believe what he said was he compared the female football team to, like, schoolgirls and said they were, like, infighting and... Was
this like a comedy radio show?
Yeah, he's like joking about it.
Well, it's fine, let's move on.
Well, that's it. But then, of course, it's context. But then everybody in Australia's gone, oh, my God, we haven't had misogyny in Australia for 3,000 years.
Yeah, just a lot of racism. No, I think with this, I'm always like, people are always going to get fired for saying the wrong thing. I don't think this person should have been fired, but then also, you've never, in any job, you say the wrong thing, even if you're not public facing, you have the risk of being fired, and it's just unfortunately just the way it is. You have to tiptoe around. There's a lot of things I want to say right now, which I'm not. So, you just play the game.
Well, say the thing you were talking about.
I won't. No. Oh, goodness. About those...
Yeah, about women's football.
Yeah. That's the one thing I do like.
Our next question is from Barbara.
Are midwives allowed an opinion?
Are midwives allowed an opinion? Yes, Barbara. This is a student midwife who was suspended for sharing her pro-life views in a private social media group last night, claimed NHS Fife is not a safe place to work for people with protected beliefs. Mother of three, Sarah Spencer, hit out after an NHS manager took action over a conscientious objection to being involved in abortions. So, Barbara, this case, by the way, NHS Fife, for people who don't know, is an ongoing case where someone has basically got suspended because they didn't want to share a changing room with a biological male. This isn't looking good for NHS Fife, is it?
It's not, and I feel everyone should be entitled to an opinion. That's what free speech is all about.
That's what they say. Thank you very much. Yes, you belong here. But yeah, this is someone sharing a message on a private group saying that they were basically, because they were doing a midwife course and they wanted to know, because they have pro-life beliefs, and that's absolutely fine. And then to be called in and said, they basically nearly got kicked off the course, right?
She did get kicked off the course. I mean, you just couldn't make it up, could you? Somebody that's delivering babies is quite likely to be, you know, quite interested in babies, and I don't find it that surprising. But even if I did, as you said, it's a protected characteristic holding that belief. So they don't have a leg to stand on. This looks terrible for NHS 5.
Yes, I mean, this is the same NHS places we just said.
Yeah.
But I mean, it shouldn't matter, surely, if they're not expressing some evil thought. This is just her personal opinion.
I guess what I'm most interested in finding out is who's the snitch in the chat who's decided to do that. You know?
Someone who's had loads of abortions.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you should be able to just say, you know, have your own beliefs. It's not like she's going out there like, you know, interrupting abortion rallies and doing things like that. Like, just,
given how many trigger warnings we have in society, but the thing that she's concerned about is ending life in her eyes. That's quite a big deal, isn't it? I think if you've got hang-ups about that, it's not unreasonable to share.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, right. A spokesperson for NHS Fife has said in response, conduct of students on placement is a matter for the academic institution. NHS Fife is committed to fostering a safe, inclusive and respectful workplace where all employees are valued and supported in line with our legal duty and professional standards. Our final question is from Luke.
Good evening. Are celebrities getting braver?
Yes, our celebrities are getting braver. Yes, so this is Chris O'Dowd has stuck up for Graham Linehan. Speaking to The Times in a new interview, O'Dowd described Linehan as the best comedy writer he had worked with and claimed that Linehan's views were not peripheral. O'Dowd then went on to say he wished Linehan was writing more. So, what do you think about this? Do you think they are getting braver?
Yeah, I think they are. I think people like Chris O'Dowd, I mean, he's sort of slagged off Graham Linehan in the past, and it's just a little bit kind of, I can't think of the word, but...
It's a bit late.
Yeah, it's far too late to the game.
I don't think that there are a lot of people who haven't, stepped up and they haven't defended Graham. And he's, as it says, as Chris said in his interview, these are views that are agreed with by the majority of the population. There are only two sexes. Women should have protected spaces. Except the thing was, Graham, of course, was one of the few people in the comedy industry to take a stand.
Battering ram of this, and Chris O'Dowd is trickling along behind him, and I don't think he's being that brave. I'm not overwhelmed. I mean, good, OK, it's better than trying to continue to cancel Graham, but I don't find it that convincing.
Fair enough. Well, what do you think? Do you think Chris is being brave here?
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to say celebrities are never brave. They're the most cowardly people I know because they're self-interested. No, but I think with Chris O'Dowd, when I read the article, I didn't see him as him particularly standing up next to Graham. I thought he just sort of said, you know, whether you agree with his beliefs or not. He's not saying I align with them, and he's saying they're not peripheral, and that could be seen by anyone with a brain, like looking at the American election. You know, so it's like I don't think he's particularly standing up for him, and I don't think, he's just trying to be relevant. He's got a movie or a TV series to promote, so that's probably why he's doing the interview in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. But it does feel that the wheel is turning. There certainly weren't people in any way standing up for Graham a couple of years ago. But that, anyway, is a good link to our next guest. Next on Free Speech Nation, the time has come, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be joined by a very special guest to discuss the free speech laws in Europe. You don't want to miss it. See you in 2 minutes.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. Ursula von der Leyen said the quiet part out loud the other day as she compared elements of free speech to a virus in an address to the EU. The president of the EU said that Europe needs societal immunity around information manipulation because research has shown that pre-bunking is much more successful than debunking. To discuss this, we needed to find someone who really knows their free speech onions, maybe someone who'd presented a show called Free Speech Union for a couple of years. So please welcome back, and a big round of applause, to Andrew Doyle!
Thanks for having me, Josh. Really appreciate it.
How are you, Andrew? How's life in America?
Yeah, at the moment, America is delightful. It's all very nice, and you're doing a fantastic job, obviously. I keep giving you jobs. That's basically all I do these days.
That is it, exactly. Do I detect an American accent there? No. You've changed,
Howdy.
man.
Sure. No, I'm not going native. Absolutely not.
So, well, I want to talk a bit more about what America's like in a second, but let's talk about this particular story. So she was talking specifically about misinformation here and not necessarily speech in general. At least that's what they're saying. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I thought it was a really chilling speech. I mean, you mentioned in your introduction that Ursula von der Leyen used the phrase pre-bunking. I suppose I should just clarify. Ursula von der Leyen, you know, she's decided that she's going to do this speech at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit. She says that she's introducing a European democracy shield, which sounds very, very dramatic. But let's not forget that Ursula von der Leyen is head of the EU Commission. That's the executive branch of the EU that's responsible for proposing and implementing new laws. But she wasn't elected. So the idea of her using the phrase democracy in anything is, you know, it's not very convincing, is it? So she's talking about effectively controlling speech for the sake of democracy. How often have we heard that before? Basically, every dictator in history has said a similar thing. But she's come up with this idea. She uses an analogy in this speech where she says that specifically disinformation is a kind of virus, and that what you need to do is inoculate yourself from disinformation, not with better information or correct information, not by debunking false information, but by pre-bunking. So she's invented this phrase pre-bunking, which basically sounds like every other aspect of the autocrat's lexicon throughout history. You know, phrases like thought crime or pre-crime, you know, it's right up there with those sorts of phrases. Pre-bunking just means censorship. What she's saying is free speech, and that includes speech that's incorrect, speech that's wrong. Free speech is a kind of virus, and the remedy for that virus is pre-bunking or censorship. That's what she's talking about here. Let's be really clear about it.
Well, one of the worst things about you going away, Andrew, is that now I'm having to actually read stuff. And
I know, sorry about that.
I know, but reading into this, it seems like they're saying that it all comes down to the EU's greatest fear being populism, as we've seen in various elections that have been taking place. The argument would go, of course, rather than censorship, maybe they should start dealing with the actual concerns of the population, of the voters.
Yeah, but they can't do that, can they? I mean, we saw that the other week when J.D. Vance was giving his speech in Munich to the security conference, and he made that point. He said to these leaders in Europe that you can't be scared of your own electorate. You have to listen to the concerns of the people who put you in power. And, you know, the guy who introduced him to the stage ended up in tears. They were talking afterwards about how disappointing. People have been saying how ugly it was. I mean, he was 100% right. And in any civilized and sensible and liberal society, you would have people on the left and the right saying, actually, of course he's got a point. You know, for too long, we've had these technocrats in Europe who effectively think that they know best. They'll do their uttermost to run roughshod over the decisions made by the people. They'll smear it as populism. You always, with that phrase populism, is always used with a bit of a sneer, isn't it? And they'll always say that the people got it wrong. I mean, the EU is a very good example. I know you're a bit of a fan, but let me just say the EU is not a democratic organisation. Ursula von der Leyen, as I say, is not elected. The EU Commission has all these powers which it really, really shouldn't have, because you can't get rid of them. You can't vote these bureaucrats out. Let's not forget that the EU has a history of rerunning elections when the people get it wrong, right? Continually doing that. It happened with Ireland, happened with Denmark. The Lisbon Treaty of 2008, Irish people voted the wrong way. They said, no, do it again. They just slapped them down, said, do it again. Let's get the right result. They did it in Greece as well. This is not a democratic organisation, but they have incredible power, particularly when it comes to legislation, but also, of course, when it comes to online speech. And that's their big target at the moment. They're effectively saying that they need to monitor social media companies and say that we need to crack down on what people can say because they're scared of disinformation. Well, that's just a phrase that people use when someone's presenting an opinion that doesn't run with their narrative. You know, the idea that anyone in power has the ability to decide what is correct and what is false. We know that's not true because the elites have been wrong about all sorts of things for a long, long time, not least in recent history. You know, there was a time just a couple of years ago when the lab leak theory at Wuhan was considered a racist conspiracy theory, and epidemiologists and anyone, in fact, who said that it might have something in it were booted off social media, were censored. Turns out they're almost certainly correct. So you can't trust the people in charge to decide what's disinformation, what's truth, what's fiction. They're not in a position to do that because they get it wrong more than most.
So have you seen any examples so far of this pre-bunking or any legislation that they are going to be putting in place to implement this?
Well, they've been trying to do it for years, and they've been trying to, you know, every sort of member state in the EU is on board with this, it seems. In the UK, of course, our government is basically saying that Ofcom should have control over the internet. So much so that Jim Jordan in the House of Congress wrote to Keir Starmer just last week and said that the Committee for Judiciary is going to be assessing. They've actually subpoenaed, I think, 8 social media companies in the US and said, we need to see any communication you've had with the UK government. Those documents are going to be coming out over the next few weeks and few months. And we're going to be seeing that people in the UK government and the EU have been putting pressure on various social media companies to say, you've got to censor on our behalf. And of course, the social media companies, if there are huge financial ramifications for that, they're just going to censor everything. They're going to censor and think about it later. They're going to be overly cautious. It's going to be really bad for the marketplace of ideas. So what you've got now, essentially, is America, with its new government, really promoting the idea of free speech. You've got Europe with this very anti-free speech position, and those two are clashing. I mean, you saw in the Oval Office the other day, didn't you, Keir Starmer sitting there with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance made the point that free speech is in a terrible state in the UK. They didn't say it quite like that. That's how I would have said it, but they said it in a sort of mealy-mouthed way. And Keir Starmer said, I just have to say I'm very proud of the history of free speech in the UK. Well, I'm very proud of the history of free speech in the UK. I'm really proud of the history of common law and the idea of standing up for people's right to say whatever they want. And, you know, John Milton and John Stuart Mill, etc. But let's not pretend that Keir Starmer is any fan of free speech. He is fully behind the online safety bill, which, by the way, was introduced by the Tories. So let's not forget, this isn't a right or left issue. He's just accelerating what the Tories already gave him. So it's a really bad situation. And there's going to be this conflict, I think, now between the EU, between the UK government and the US. They have completely different worldviews on this. The idea that the US seems to be espousing now is let people speak. The best solution to bad speech is more speech. The best solution to incorrect and factually incorrect speech is to provide correct information. But the elites of Europe believe that the masses can't be trusted with false information, that they just vote mindlessly like drones according to what some Russian bots tell them. That's why the election in Romania was overturned. You know, they think that people are that stupid. In the UK, we heard it for ages, didn't we? People voted for Brexit because of Russian bots. People voted for Brexit because of a slogan that was on the side of a bus. And that's not true. There were months and months and months of rigorous debate. The people of the UK had never been so energised. It was the largest political mandate in history, and still they say, yeah, but these little kids, the great unwashed, the electorate, they don't really know what they mean. Let's try and overturn their decision. We need a whole new system of government. We need to think about government as being servants of the people, of the demos. We need to get that back again. And free speech is going to be the front line. Free speech is going to be the battleground. And I'm afraid at the moment in the UK and in the EU, we are definitely losing that battle.
Well, when you say Sir Keir Starmer talking about he's proud of the history of free speech, he didn't say the present of free speech.
No, he's he's got a legal background, hasn't he? He's a lawyer, so
yeah,
that makes sense.
It sounds like you got out of the UK just about the right time then. So, and what do the Americans think of us over here, and certainly in terms of free speech? When you meet them and you say, "Oh, I'm British," do they go, "Oh God, you must be so happy to be able to say what you want"? That's one of my favourite accents.
I really want people in the UK to understand how mental they think we are. Like anyone over here from the left, from the right, across the board, they think it is absolutely crazy that people are going to prison for memes and tweets and social media posts. They think it's crazy that we have non-crime hate incidents that the police are recording. The fact that the police will knock on your door if you criticise a Labour councillor, whatever it might be. They think it's nuts, and it's not a partisan issue. I really need to emphasise this. They have their First Amendment. And the reason why, I think, or one of the major reasons why Kamala Harris was so trounced, is because the Democrats have been edging towards this idea of amending the First Amendment so it doesn't include what they call hate speech. You know, you had Tim Walz in the vice presidential debate saying that hate speech isn't covered by the First Amendment. Well, yes, it is. Hateful speech is covered in free speech. And also you've had John Kerry, of course, John Kerry saying that disinformation, that the First Amendment was a major block when it comes to dealing with disinformation. So every time the American ruling class push back against free speech, they get punished at the ballot box, and they get punished by their own side as well. And that's why, from an American perspective, the UK is inexplicable. They do not understand how it can be that the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, can stand there and effectively put pressure on the judiciary to lock people up for a long, long time, to release actual criminals, rapists, killers, whatever, to make space in our overcrowded prison system for someone who's posted a meme. And yes, some of the things that were posted are horrible. Some of the things that were posted are objectionable and deserve criticism, robust criticism. But the idea that you should silence people who say horrible things is a fundamental flaw in anyone's argument who believes in liberty, because free speech protections aren't there for the people who say the nice, fluffy things. Those protections are there for those people who say the horrible things, the controversial things, and every now and then you'll get horrible trolls, just abusive people who are going to use that free speech to say those horrible things. And then every now and then you get a Galileo who's saying a really uncomfortable truth and ends up under house arrest for being 100% right. So you have to be very careful about free speech. It's not about the things that the people say and whether they're objectionable or not. The point is the principle. The principle is bigger than any statement that any individual can make. The principle is not whether the meme that this person posted and is now in prison for was offensive. The principle is whether, we should, as a society, be relinquishing the bedrock of our democracy, which is free speech. It's that value that underpins every other freedom we have. The Americans understand this. The Brits and the Europeans do not.
Well, Andrew, I miss you so much. I think that we can say, though, that you are going to be appearing on the channel more now, which is obviously amazing for us. And thank you so much for joining us. And I hope America's working out brilliant for you. Andrew Doyle, everybody. Lots of fans. Next on Free Speech Nation, extraordinary scenes as an Iranian woman is shouted down at a British university for criticising Iran. Seriously. See you after the break.
dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. Well, if you're heading towards Spain and the Canaries over the coming days, there will be some rain and potentially some strong winds around at times, but conditions will improve here as the week goes on. For parts of central Med, generally a fine start to the week here, maybe a few showers around, and for eastern areas, certainly temperatures are beginning to climb after a cold few days. And further west, actually, sunshine by the middle part of the week for Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tom Pickup, host of the Really 007 podcast. Hello, Tom. Thank you very much for joining. I've just been singing Live and Let Die to myself for some random reason. So what's going on here, then? Is Bond going to be changed forever? I mean, Barbara Broccoli was pretty hands-on and tough with what happened to that.
Yeah, you've got to think that this goes back to 1962 when it all started with Sean Connery and Dr. No. Her father, Cubby Broccoli, got the film rights and began the franchise and the movie character we all know as James Bond. So it's a big change. It was always going to come to an end eventually. Barbara took over pretty much when her father died, before GoldenEye, when Pierce Brosnan was the new Bond. But she's really had all the control with her half-brother, Michael G. Wilson, who's the other producer on Eon, since then, since 95, really. And they didn't cast Pierce Brosnan themselves. That was Cubby's casting. Their real casting was Daniel Craig. And I think now that that chapter has come to an end, and whether you liked it or not, it had a very definite ending, maybe that's been part of the reason where they think they'd rather spend their time in retirement doing something else. It's time to pass it on. And they've got a ready-made partner already in Amazon.
Is it going to get a little bit woke, though, Tom?
I've no idea, but all I know is that Jeff Bezos obviously is head of Amazon. He's already put a tweet up or on X saying, "Who do you want as the new James Bond?"
Oh, okay.
So he's already including the fans, which I suppose is a good thing. Whether or not we'll have a say, we don't know. But I think what it'll be is what people want, what people on the outside see as James Bond, not necessarily super fans like me.
The People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Please take a look at this extraordinary scene from a British university this week.
Of them was the flag, because they wanted to remove...
I can't talk about the flag being changed when you're aligning yourself with somebody who's Israeli and trying to have a conversation about Palestine and not even acknowledging that there's a genocide that's been happening for 15 months.
That's just like being at home. So just to remind you, that is an Iranian Muslim woman being shouted down for wanting regime change in her own country. I'm delighted to say that Faiza Alevi is here with me now to discuss this. Welcome, Faiza. Those clips, there's more than that clip. It went out into the corridor. They basically stopped the event. First of all, tell us, please, what was the event that you were holding? What was the talk?
Actually, the event was related to the will of the Iranian people to change the regime and their vision for the future of Iran, post-regime future. the vision that they have for the relation between Israel and Iran, and they want, actually, in short, they want peace. They are tired of what is happening in Iran. So the whole event was about dialogue between Iranians and Israelis and the vision for the post-regime Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. For a Middle East, which is only peace is really going to come when that does finally happen. And how soon into the talk did people start interrupting and scream like that? Because actually, I don't think we even played the most screamy element of it. It got very heated. It wasn't even like a discussion in any way. It was just people shouting at you, right?
It was just shouting and screaming. We were first talking about my personal experience as Muslim Iranian living in Iran, what led me to the UK. And after that, we talked a little bit about the Islamist, communist revolution in 1979, what was the vibe back then. And then I started to talk about Iranian people in diaspora that in their protest, they are trying to raise the national flag of Iran, the lion and sun flag of Iran, not the Islamic version of it, which was adopted in 1979. And I was going to say that whenever people are raising the flag of Iran in their protests and chanting for regime change, they are also raising the Israeli flag. Because they want to see a peace and they want to shout it. They want the world to know that these people want a new relationship in the Middle East. These people want a prosperous Middle East. And right after that, before I can have a chance to talk about the Israeli flag, they started just screaming and shouting at me. And to be honest, I even couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at a lot of these counter-protests to the pro-Palestinian marches, and I've got to say, some of the biggest supporters and bravest people I've met have been Iranian people calling for regime change in Iran. When they started shouting, really shouting you down, what was the response then from security?
First, the moderator went to the security and called the security, and security came in. He started to calm them down, but absolutely it was unsuccessful. So security came to me and talked to me that it's not safe anymore here. Please let me just...
So you're the one who has to go, not them, you.
Yes.
And that is right there the problem in this country. Is it that they didn't feel they had enough security staff to be able to take... Because how many people were there? How many protesters were there?
I don't know the exact numbers, but there were quite a lot, maybe 10 or more than that for Palestinian mob.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is, from my understanding of people who were part of this protest, if you can even call it that, was I don't think any of them actually from the Middle East. It didn't seem that way. I mean, some of the people who've been identified aren't Middle Eastern. They're people from other backgrounds, which you kind of go, what's it got to do with you in that way?
Actually, the fact is that in the Middle East, there are millions of Muslims, either Iranians or from Arab countries, who want peace, who want a new situation. And these people are usually being shut down by the extremists. And I think the main purpose of this Palestinian mob is that they don't want the world to know that there are millions of Muslims around the world that want to see a prosperous Middle East, that they want to have a good relationship with Israel.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the largest group of victims of extremist violence are Muslims.
Yes.
Way more than 50%. Yes. So you have groups like that in this country. Have you had any contact from the university to talk about this experience, to reschedule the event?
Well, we are talking with the organizers, which is the King's Geopolitics Forum. I have a great friend. The moderator was actually my friend, Miles. And we are just in contact together to see what we can do for the future. Maybe I'm not sure about the finalized plan, but maybe we can reschedule it. But from the university itself, the entity as a university, I didn't have any contact from the security, nothing.
Nothing after that. They haven't contacted you, apologized for this event being closed down, for not providing the necessary security. And it seems like, again, this is online, it's not 100% confirmed, but from what I understand is that the person we saw screaming there in that video actually works for the student union, I believe, at the university.
There were different people there, and fortunately, as I said, my friend Miles, which was the moderator, is trying to identify these people. Some of them were external, some of them were internals. But the reality is that some of them are denying that, okay, these were not pro-Palestinian mobs. These people were not like promoting. They were not just supportive of the Palestinian people. They were just extremists. They are denying it. But as we have like posts on Instagram showing that some organizations are posting this video and they are telling that we don't allow these kind of events happen again in the university. We'll shut down all of them.
That's incredible, isn't it? And it seems like university administrators are allowing this to happen, whether tacitly or not. Yes, and someone else who was part of that protest, I believe I saw had evidence had said for jihad against people as well. So it's definitely extremist more than just people like. It's not like a peaceful. Oh, let's bring some highlights to the Palestinian cause. It seems more than that. It's shutting down Muslims who want to present a different narrative than they want to put out there.
I think they are really afraid to see a Muslim Iranian sitting next to a Jewish person or Israeli person talking about the peace and the prosperous Middle East. They don't want this to happen. And another thing is that, as you mentioned, when there is no empathy to make them responsible for what they are doing, they will continue to do this.
Yeah, well, personally, I hold the university responsible for this. And fortunately, we'd managed to have a Jewish person and a Muslim person sitting next to each other, and we weren't interrupted. So that's very good there. Thank you so much to Faiza Alavi there. So big round of applause. I should say here, a King's College spokesperson said, "We are investigating the disruption at a student society event last night in line with our policies and procedures for protest." Next on Free Speech Nation, it's that time of the week again. We're going to be having a look at what went viral this week after the breaks in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. The north-south split that we've seen over the weekend does continue into the new working week with temperatures around about average for the time of year, but they are on the rise by the time we get to next week. However, high pressure still very much in charge across the southern half of the UK. Weather fronts trying to push in from the northwest, but generally weakening as they bump into that area of high pressure. This weather front perhaps bringing some quite heavy rainfall to western parts of Scotland through Sunday evening, but that rain gradually easing as it slips its way south and eastwards. The further south across the UK is a bit of a different picture. Plenty of clear spells overnight and likely turning really quite chilly here, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places, but generally not quite as cold under that cloud further north. Where we do see those clear spells across the southern half of the UK, we are likely to see some mist and fog developing overnight, and that could lead to a bit of disruption during Monday morning's rush hour, so do take care if you are travelling. Across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, into southern parts of Scotland, quite a cloudy start to the new working week. Some outbreaks of rain and drizzle, perhaps some hill fog in places, and for much of Scotland it will be a really quite cloudy start to the day. Some blustery showers feeding in across parts of Shetland and Orkney through Monday morning. Those blustery showers continue as we head towards Monday afternoon for Shetland and Orkney, and that rain and cloud across the central swathe of the UK does gradually start to ease as we go through the afternoon, but still remaining quite grey here to the end of Monday. But further south, again, the best of the sunshine here, plenty of blue skies on offer, and temperatures similar to what we saw over the weekend, highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees as a maximum. As we then start on Tuesday, it'll be another cold, frosty, perhaps misty and foggy start across the southern half of the UK, but always cloudier further north, seeing rain arriving across the very far northwest as we head towards Tuesday afternoon, and really turning quite blustery here as well, perhaps some outbreaks of quite heavy rain across the northwest. But further south, it does look like it's going to stay sunny throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, and those temperatures are on the rise. We could see highs of 15 or 16 by Thursday.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's time now for Social Sensations, the part of the show where we look at what's been going viral this week on social media. First up, guess who? It's President Trump and his plans for the Gaza Strip.
No more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright. Golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright. Golden future, a brand new light.
It's such a catchy song.
That's the first time I've seen that with the sound.
Oh, really? Okay.
No idea there was a trick.
Look, that's some epic trolling from Trump. I'm not happy myself with some of the things that have gone down with Trump. He didn't make this video. He's put it out there. And the idea is that it pushes the conversation on. Now, look, people are suffering at present. I do get that. But if it could get something like that, maybe less statues of Trump, surely that's a good thing. If it could be a genuine Riviera, that's what they've always said about the region. It's beautiful beaches.
It's very hard to argue with that, isn't it? But there's ways of doing it. I had a boyfriend once who was very, very messy.
Humble brag.
And his house was covered in pizza boxes, and I tried to insist on tidying it up once, and now I don't have a boyfriend. So I'm just saying you have to be very careful about pushing your design ideas on people. It's not that sensitively done, is it?
No, it's not. But then Trump has never been accused of being sensitive.
I'm convinced to this day he didn't even see the full video. He just saw his name in gold letters and he thought, that's good, I'll put that up there.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Right. Yeah. I do hope they release that song, though. Next up, the ever-expanding list of previously harmless things which are now racist has a new entry today. However, I think I could only get on board with this one, possibly.
Black women, when we do the same diets as white women, we lose less weight and we lose it slower. The racism that you're experiencing and the struggle to make ends meet actually means the diet don't work for you the same.
Adam, I'm going on a diet after watching that.
Right.
Because supposedly it must be really easy as a white guy.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're in quite good shape, I'd say.
Because I'm holding my stomach in for 2
hours.
hours.
Okay. That's very good.
Oh, my God, I just want the show to be over.
I wonder if that lady, maybe she's onto something. Maybe there is some huge thing, like genetically people who look different have different things, but I don't think it's true. It's just like if you eat the same, you're going to look the same. Yeah. I don't know. It's weird to think there's race-based,
I've never heard of any kind of race-based diet.
But we have it with vaccines, though, don't we? We have like certain people from certain things. They have like when I got given the BCG, they said, "Oh, because you're not like white English, there's a chance that you might be more susceptible to certain viruses." I don't know if that's the same with being fat.
And that's why you're overweight.
Well, I don't deny any of that. Of course, there could be differences between the races, but that lady, and I wouldn't normally comment on it, but she looks like
yes, I know.
Well nourished.
That factor isn't what's determining that lady's size.
No, I would say that she eats a lot of food.
I think she might do.
Can I just interrupt? I do want to say that on this, regardless of getting rid of the race thing, I think what is interesting to say is that ultra-processed food is the common cause of this, and you see it in lots of stuff. So, and you look at like the trajectory of even Brazil, which is relatively new. They've got a huge wave of obesity now because they've introduced lots of ultra-processed food. No one's cooking at home; they're just getting convenient things. So,
arguably it's going to get worse in the UK.
Maybe
there is a trade deal with America with some of the drugs that are coming in.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We'll see. Right, now, Catherine Ryan is the latest celebrity to do a screeching U-turn on woke issues. She recently did an interview saying that audiences have turned on the woke movement and are tired of the people kind mentality. But let's have a little look at what she was saying a few short years ago.
Important to be a trans ally because there are some weirdos out there who take a very strange interest on who uses what bathroom and who's allowed to do what. These people, they need to be stopped, because live your life, freedom. That's like what it's all about. Trans people are so entitled to that freedom.
She's literally talking about me. There, as one of the weirdos. No, because people, that's what they always say when you talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. People, and certainly a couple of years ago, and I'd be down the pub with friends, and actually I know Catherine, and we get on fairly well. I like her as a person.
I don't know if you will after this, but
no. But the point is that when I bring up this stuff, people are just like, why do you even care? And it's like, do you not see how huge this issue is? It's about reality. It's about children's health. It's about women's spaces. It's everything.
I mean, it doesn't matter because I'm not Catherine Ryan, but I remember thinking, oh, man in a dress, whatever. And then eventually I saw Posey Parker and I went, and I started to tune into the issues, because for a long time I just didn't think it was significant. I don't know how long ago she made that
This was
clip.
about 2 or 3 years ago, and there were a bunch of comedians coming out, speaking in aid of mermaids, and it's a highly contentious charity.
I don't believe they exist. I think, yeah, what you're saying. I've spoken to. I'm still in those circles. I've got a lot of friends who are very left wing and stuff. But
ban me. They've banned me.
Yes, but I'm a bit more. I think I have similar views to you, Josh. But I'm a bit more sort of palatable, a bit more tasteful. I'm able to get the same points across, but in a nicer way. And I just use therapized speech. You're all very feminized, and I still have my friendship group.
I'm just like, you're so stupid. How do you not see it?
And that's the reason why no one likes you, Josh. Apart from me, of course.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. But again, we sort of we talked about Chris Haddad earlier, talking about Graham Linehan. Again, the wheel turning, but it's so frustrating. Look, there's a difference between someone going, OK, you know what, I didn't actually look into it at the time and I made a mistake and I just wanted to be a good person, and now that I've read into it a bit more, I can see that there are issues that we need to discuss. But to kind of, and it seemed like what she was coming across in this interview, like it had nothing to do with her at all, and now she's kind of like, oh, look at me and the wheel, it's all a bit ridiculous. And you were like, you were one of the people. Like we had Ash Sakar, we didn't talk about that clip last week, but she's putting out a book now saying pretty much exactly the same. You're one of the cheerleaders. And Catherine Ryan is very successful, famous person, and pushing that ideology to now turn around 2 years later or something and go, oh, yeah, you know, it's all a bit ridiculous, or it's all, I'm not woke. It's like, you're one of the spokespeople for this.
Yeah, and if she did some kind of mea culpa, I don't know, would that be helpful? Because it just looks a bit silly, doesn't it? And all these people that have glued themselves to this ideology have got to find a way of coming unstuck, and we've got to let them back across the line.
No. No, you are on the other side of the line. Finally, an enterprising ex-user has come up with a new advertising strategy for Clinton cards.
You don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
That's great advertising there. It is all about the cards with Trump, isn't it? He's obsessed with the cards.
He is obsessed with the cards, and someone's going to put a sick beat behind that, and you're going to be done. There's going to be a whole album of Trump songs in a minute.
The guy is so memeable. It's very. But yeah, what do you think his obsession with cards is? And then Zelensky was like, I'm not playing cards.
Yeah, it's just an interesting. It's a very interesting way to sort of say to someone, I'm bigger than you and better than you. Like I liked when he sort of said to Starmo, and he was like, you know, I think we're really good. We have a really good partnership. And then Trump said, could you fight Russia on your own? And like really belittled him, and you almost saw him remove the testicles from Starmo. It was quite embarrassing, but
yeah. All right. Well, look. Very quickly, Jasper. You have a question for us, yeah?
I do have a question. Yes. Hello. So about 35% of grassroots music venues in the UK have closed in the last 20 years. And assuming we all want to listen to good music, shouldn't we do something, or can we do something about this, please?
I hope so, yeah. This is a real issue. That's where these new groups are going to come through, and if the venues are closing down, we've got a real problem there. So, yeah, I 100% agree with you. Thank you very much. Right, thank you as well for joining us for Free Speech Nation. Thank you to my panel, Cresta Wetton and Adam Kumas, and to all my brilliant guests this evening. And if you want to join us live in the studio, be part of our wonderful audience, you can. Go to www.srraudiences.com. Stay tuned for the brilliant Ben Leo tonight. Thank you very much.
We can expect clear skies leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. The north-south split that we've seen over the weekend does continue into the new working week, with temperatures around about average for the time of year, but they are on the rise by the time we get to next week. However, high pressure still very much in charge across the southern half of the UK. Weather fronts trying to push in from the northwest, but generally weakening as they bump into that area of high pressure. This weather front perhaps bringing some quite heavy rainfall to western parts of Scotland through Sunday evening, but that rain gradually easing as it slips its way south and eastwards. The further south across the UK is a bit of a different picture. Plenty of clear spells overnight and likely turning really quite chilly here, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places, but generally not quite as cold under that cloud further north. Where we do see those clear spells across the southern half of the UK, we are likely to see some mist and fog developing overnight, and that could lead to a bit of disruption during Monday morning's rush hour, so do take care if you are travelling. Across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, into southern parts of Scotland, quite a cloudy start to the new working week. Some outbreaks of rain and drizzle, perhaps some hill fog in places, and for much of Scotland it will be a really quite cloudy start to the day. Some blustery showers feeding in across parts of Shetland and Orkney through Monday morning. Those blustery showers continue as we head towards Monday afternoon for Shetland and Orkney, and that rain and cloud across the central swathe of the UK does gradually start to ease as we go through the afternoon, but still remaining quite grey here to the end of Monday. But further south, again, the best of the sunshine here, plenty of blue skies on offer, and temperatures similar to what we saw over the weekend. Highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees as a maximum. As we then start on Tuesday, it'll be another cold, frosty, perhaps misty and foggy start across the southern half of the UK, but always cloudier further north, seeing rain arriving across the very far northwest as we head towards Tuesday afternoon, and really turning quite blustery here as well, perhaps some outbreaks of quite heavy rain across the northwest. But further south, it does look like it's going to stay sunny throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, and those temperatures are on the rise. We could see highs of 15 or 16 by Thursday.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, It happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30.